I now have a live on YouTube in my corner of the screen. Does that mean we are up and running?
I think so.
It must be that Senator McCormick joining us caused that to happen.
I'm the man.
He's always bringing good
It's
news.
going. It's
All
going.
right, all right.
He's always bringing good news.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is the 5th day of May 2021. We are live on YouTube, and the committee is discussing the topic of re-entering the State House. I am Joe Benning, the chair of the committee. We also have committee members Senator Mazza from Grand Isles, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator Parent from Franklin County, and Senator McCormick from Windsor County. This discussion is the literal tip of an iceberg. For those of you on screen, I just want to give you a heads up that I've explained at the beginning of every committee meeting, we have an unknown number of people that are on YouTube watching us. Could be nobody, it could be a million, we just don't know. But as a result of not knowing, what I try to do is make sure we are all talking at the 50,000 foot level so that people that are here watching for the first time and have never been involved in a committee process get some basic education on who we are and what we are all about. If you get interrupted during your testimony, it will probably be because you've used an acronym of some kind or some commonly known vernacular with us, but totally unknown to the world at large. And I'm only doing that to make sure that we all remain at the 50,000 foot level as much as possible. Having said all of that, our topic of conversation, as I said earlier, is a tip of the iceberg to talk about going back into the State House. There are really 3 stages of going back into the State House as I see it. And by the way, I'm on a major corner in Lyndonville, Vermont, so I'm going to wait a second. There we go. The ambulance is going by. Hopefully everybody's okay. But we are talking about 3 stages, the immediate stage, and then there is a medium stage and a long-term stage. Thus far, all 3 stages seem to have been clouded by the narrative of the existence of COVID-19. I'm going to start thinking in the line of thought that COVID-19 is behind us as we walk forward into the conversation. I do understand and am fully cognizant of the fact that we had space problems prior to COVID-19 coming into play. We will have those problems as well as fear and suspicion of people going forward as COVID-19 leaves us. But the narrative of that conversation has to change in the event either the governor's executive order lapses or the first week in January comes by, because in either of those 2 cases, the latter of which is the official triggering mechanism for our temporary rules that currently have us on Zoom to evaporate, which means our conversation has to start talking about what happens when we go back immediately. And as you are all aware, an architectural firm called Freeman, French and Freeman, who was with us yesterday, put forward 2 proposed options. I want to make very clear that report is not cast in stone for us in making decisions. We may adopt one or the other of those 2 options. We may adopt some hybrid of that. We may chuck the entire document and start from scratch, but no one is committed to anything at this point in time. The purpose of these conversations is to get us started on the path for how do we actually talk universally about getting back into the building. For the public's edification, today features legislative staff members who have been invited as stakeholders in the conversation. and they are invited to basically express themselves in whatever way, shape, or form they would like. And I will do my best to take notes. This may be the first of several conversations that this group of stakeholders has in the process. So I don't want to get anybody sort of thinking that this is the one and only chance to make every statement that has to be had. This is the beginning of a conversation. With that, I do not have a list of who is here. I can certainly see you on the screen. So I'm going to start. I see Jen Carby is here. I normally look to you and Michael O'Grady as at the top of the list, so to speak, for Ledge Council these days. And I'm happy to start with you, Jen, because you're the only one I can visually see thus far. Good afternoon and welcome to Institutions.
Thank you. Jennifer Carby, Legislative Council. I will say, I know Mike O'Grady was at the last minute scheduled in another committee, and so I'm happy to wait until later to see if he's able to join us, or he and Nadine and I have talked and I can proceed without him. Do you have a preference?
I have no preference whatsoever. So how about if you tell me what your preference is?
All right. Well, maybe I'll give you a sense for what we're thinking, and then if he's able to join us later, he can share his thoughts as well. We were able to have a preliminary conversation at the legal staff meeting this week after asking folks to take a look at the study. I'm pleased to hear you say, Senator, at the outset that nothing is cast in stone, because the attorneys have, and I'll speak for the attorneys first and let Nadine speak for drafting operations, but the attorneys have a lot of concerns about the recommendations from the space study that was delivered to the legislature, namely that it seems to exclude the legal staff from the building for what seems like it may be 3 to 10 years, if that's what's defined as medium term. There were certainly a number of provisions that we thought were unclear in the report, particularly around drafting operations and whether the authors of the report understood that the editors are part of drafting operations and that drafting operations is part of the Office of Legislative Counsel. There seemed to be some inconsistencies throughout. Also, lack of clarity around the 6 attorneys who are currently have physical office space in the Pink Lady, one bald one next door to the State House, and where they would go. But the idea of what feels like banishing the legal staff to 133 State Street, which would create really the need to pack our things and walk up to the State House and stay in some unspecified location all day long, because it's really not possible to go back and forth easily between the State House and 133, particularly during the winter, is not appealing in any way. We have concerns about our ability to deliver timely services to the legislative committees and individual legislators if we are located away from the State House. Concerns about how to maintain our files and have a safe and secure and confidential location to keep client materials and to meet with clients. The expectation that our clients will likely not make the trek to 133 State Street and whatever stairs or elevators may be involved there in order to have meetings with us. So then we would need to have somewhere to meet in the way that we currently do in our offices.
Jen, can I just interrupt you for
sure.
a second? You've got 6 counsel in the Pink Lady. Did I hear that?
That's right. Yep.
And how many other attorneys are actually involved in the conversation?
12. I believe we have 18 full-time, along with typically at least 1 law clerk, and then 2 to 3 interns during law student interns during the session, but 18 full-time.
Okay. I should say in your camp, one thing I think is committed to stone, and that is your ability to meet in a private office with your clients is absolutely paramount. So that's not something that we have even thought about discarding. So for whatever that's worth, that's the only thing I can say right now, I think is pretty much consensus across all quarters that you have private offices in which you can meet with your clients. I interrupted you. I'm going to let you
That's all right.
continue. Then I've got some questions.
Okay. So we were unclear on the concept of hoteling from the report and what that would look like, and particularly how that would work when we would likely have more attorneys needing space to do work or to meet with clients. Then there would be open spaces and also potential public health concerns with that as well, with people sharing physical spaces going forward, even outside of the COVID era. But in a time during flu season, for example, where people would be touching the same surfaces, sharing the same workstations. I think a big part of it for us as well is morale, is the atmosphere in the office, is the feeling like we are part of the State House environment, which we have, I think, been an integral part of. And in the past, we have, we not infrequently have attorneys who are offered positions in other parts of state government or in the private sector, and who choose to remain because they're committed to the work. But part of that is also having your own kind of dedicated workspace in a convenient location, and being able to collaborate with colleagues and have convenient access as well to our clients.
I just thought you guys stayed because you liked us.
Well, the fun part is also to see who turns over. There's for the most part, we stay the same, and sometimes you guys change, which is also part of the fun. It is a great place to work, but I think there are a lot of concerns about what happens if and what it will feel like if we get moved further away from the State House. And as somebody who personally, I work in the Pink Lady, run back and forth across the parking lot, often in heels in the middle of winter, it's treacherous, and that's on a reasonably flat surface. So the idea of going up and down a hill, an icy hill that I understand people have, legislators and staff have fallen on in the past, is of considerable concern. And I think for a lot of people, it would be easier to find some other way to just work from home rather than commuting back and forth to something that is not convenient.
Okay.
So I think those are our main issues. We would like to find a way to continue to be part of the State House as things move forward, and have real concerns about a medium-term, many-year process to get to something else. I think as far as the long-term is concerned, some of the ideas in the report look intriguing, and I think we would, like the idea of having more space for the committees, for the members, and for the staff as well.
Okay. Before I open it up to committee questions, Nadine, do you have anything else you'd like to chip into that conversation?
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Nadine Martin, I'm the supervisor of drafting operations, which is support services to the Legislative Council, which is the legal staff for the General Assembly. Drafting operations right now is located, I shouldn't say we are located, our offices are located in the back of the State House, behind operations where Mike Ferrand and Peggy and others have their desks. Right now, all of my staff, except me, are working remotely. I can't work remotely because I don't have adequate internet access where I live. So I have been coming every day. Plus, under the current circumstances, with the General Assembly still doing much of its official business for archival paper storage, someone has to be here to handle that paper. In your distant future, that part of the process may change, but for right now, that's an important part of what happens here.
You may be the only one of your staff working in the building, but I guarantee you that every legislator is extremely jealous of your current situation.
I love this building and I love the process and the history and the purpose of it. But it must be said that even before COVID, the space that we are in, although it has been renovated to be more attractive and professional, still has serious issues of air quality and has had. And so that will be a concern in the future until it can be addressed for the whole building. The recommendations in the report, which I understand are just recommendations that might move us temporarily to another basement, I must say my staff was appalled by. They really, why take us out of one basement to put us in a worse basement?
Just for the public's edification, Nadine, a lot of people know legislators are in the building. Some people know that there are legislative counsel in the building. For the drafting department, can you tell me first, how many staff members do you have?
There are 7 on our staff, including me, during session. 2 of them are seasonal. There are 3 full-time legislative attorneys, drafting attorneys, and the others are technicians, with 1 person devoted primarily to assisting Michael Chernick in the drafting and processing of resolutions, but she helps with other things as well.
Now, this may sound elementary to those on the screen, but for the public's purpose, can you give us a brief sketch of what your department actually does?
Yes, we right now, I'm searching for the word. Normally, if we're all here, we receive pieces of paper. Right now, we receive electronic files up from the attorneys. The editors go through them to look for formatting issues, grammatical issues, adherence to the drafting manual that Jen Carby is in charge of, and make sure that all of the changes conform. Our editors mark up the pieces of paper or the electronic files, give them to a technician who actually enters the changes, returns both documents to the attorney, along with any questions that the editor may have raised about, why are you doing it this way? Is this what you meant? Is that really so? So it's documents passing back and forth. When a bill is introduced, we receive what's called the sign-out sheet, which is the legislator's approval to have their names put on the bill as sponsors and published on the website. We post the documents to the website. And then at each stage, as amendments are written or as a bill passes from one body to the other, the documents come to us again for editorial review, technical corrections, get sent out to the attorneys for review, and get sent back and get posted on the website. So we're the processors behind the scenes. No policy decisions, just making sure that the documents are as correct as possible.
And just again, for the public's edification, how many bills would you estimate you handle in a given year?
Bills, about 400 for the House and another 250 for the Senate, but we see each one 4 or 5 or 6 times plus all the amendments. So we could get you the number of how many documents we process. Our senior editor actually tracks that.
And who is your senior editor?
Our senior editor at this time is Alec Adams, who has been with us, I'm going to say 7 years, maybe. He actually is working remotely, very remotely. He lives in New Hampshire.
Okay. I'm reminded that Senator McCormick had to be off for another meeting, so if you see his face disappear, you'll know why. I'm going to pause for committee questions at this stage with Jennifer and Nadine in case the committee wants to ask either. I also noted that Michael Chernick was here. I don't know whether Michael is part of this conversation or not, but I guess, Jen, I should leave that up to you. And Michael.
Michael was going to testify for himself on his own
Okay.
position, although he was also part of our committee of our legal staff meeting discussion last week.
Okay, committee members, especially before Dick has to leave. Senator Ingalls.
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you for what you do, all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all.
You're
It's
very
our
welcome.
first
We
attempt-
enjoy it.
That's our first attempt at brownie points this afternoon. Thank you, Russell.
Yep.
Other questions? Senator Mazza.
What are we trying to get out of this conversation today? What is the purpose?
We are having the tip of the iceberg conversations about thoughts in re-entering the building. We are allowing stakeholders to come and talk to us about what they've been thinking. We have all kinds of rumors swirling about, and we are making clear to everybody that comes that no decisions have been made yet at all, but we all have to be involved in the conversation about how to re-enter the building. And when we do, what steps are we taking to improve the space needs that were especially problematic prior to COVID-19? Hope that answers the question.
Are we too early though? We don't know what's going to happen till months.
My thought on that, Dick, is January is fast approaching and adjournment is coming much quicker. So giving folks the opportunity to talk with us at the earliest moment is, for me, critical. And that's why we've got the rest of the week scheduled for various stakeholders. Fair questions. Other committee members, any thoughts, comments? Seeing none, Jennifer, Nadine, I want to thank you both. You're welcome to stick around, but I'm going to turn at this point to Michael Chernick.
Sure. If I could just leave you with one sort of parting
Sure.
thought of our overall sense in reading the report is that it appears to be written by people who don't understand how the building works in practice. I think it's approached from an architectural standpoint and not from a practical standpoint of how the work gets done and the people move throughout the building and the interactions occur.
I'll quickly respond and say I think that is a fair assessment that even they acknowledge. They did speak to as many stakeholders as they were given the ability to do, but the conversations did not necessarily gel so far to understand how the building components work with each other. They were more interested in the conversation of space needs. But that's part of why we're having this conversation at this point in time. Okay, with that, Michael Chernick, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name's Michael Chernick. I'm one of the staff attorneys here at Legislative Council. I had requested to testify before we were certain Jen was going to testify, but I still appreciate the opportunity. First of all, I am in total concurrence with everything that the Dean and Jen said. I could not agree more. That's number one. Number two is I'm culturally concerned. If you move us down in addition to all the points that Jen made, if you move us down to 133 State Street, that will mean that legislative council attorneys will not be immediately accessible to you the way we are now. And I certainly know from my particular practice with writing resolutions, but it's applicable to everyone who writes bills as well, that we have attorneys, members rather, coming in and out of our offices all day, throughout the day. We are going back and forth up to testify in committee, to meet members in the cafeteria, even in the hallway on occasion. And that there's a constant flow. And I'm very concerned that if you move us even to 133, which granted is not physically very far away, but in the middle of the winter will seem a long distance to both legislators and staff, that it's going to be a major cultural change. We will not be immediately accessible the way we historically have been, whether we've been here or years ago in the legislative lounge where legislative attorneys used to work, but we were always nearby and in the building. And I think there's going to be a real issue on that. And it's going to change the flow process, the cultural process, and everyone should be extremely aware of that as they proceed. And I wanted to emphasize Jen's comment that I also concurred, having read the report, that the architects were not, while they were, I'm sure they're great architects, and I'm aware of that, that they're not aware of what goes on day in, day out in this building. And that we have that perspective. You have that perspective as a veteran legislator, and that you need to bring that to the table. I'm also concerned, something else we discussed in staff meeting on Monday, that there seemed to be a lack of appreciation that A, Nadine's staff includes the editors and that they're not a separate staff, and that B, Nadine's staff is part of our overall Ledge Council group after we split this past year with the Staff Reorganization Act. From my perspective, and again, I'm speaking for myself here and not for the entire office, I feel very strongly that the dean's staff and our staff, all the attorneys, we need to be together the way we are now. It's enough of an issue that 6 of my colleagues are already across the street in the Pink Lady. We've managed with that, but it's not been a fantastic situation. To put us all further away, I think is going to cause even more problems. And to have Nadine's staff separate from our staff, which was the way that I read the report. I may be wrong, but that's certainly how I read it. That's going to be problematic internally. So I'm very concerned about all of those points, operationally, culturally. The one other point I will make, Senator, and again, thank you very much for your time, or 2 points in summation. Number one is I agree in the long run, we would ideally like alternative space. Where the editors and the dean are in the long run, it's not good from a public health perspective. Absolutely. Total concurrence on that. And if I may make one non-staff comment, if I may, that doesn't directly affect us, having shepherded in the volumes of the VSA every year from the publishers as part of my job as a member of the Stat Rev Committee, eventually having a separate loading dock would be very nice, but it's not the most immediate issue. My focus today is on the staff-related pieces. I realize there are other IT pieces, operational pieces involved, but I do have very strong concerns about the impact on legislative council staff. And again, in summary, I'm in total concurrence with everything that Nadine and Jen said. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee.
Michael, do you happen to know whether the architectural firm considered the loading dock question? I know that the proposal features a separate loading dock area, but did anybody communicate with Ledge Council about what kinds of volume of materials were going through that loading dock and how people had to have access to them?
Not to me directly. They may have communicated with Mike Ferran or with Nadine, but not me, or possibly with Luke earlier on before he took his leave.
Okay.
But I was addressing that issue specifically because I've gone out and shepherded in trucks of VSA volumes and supplements over the years. And I know that the dance that we've done with the trucks and the cars coming in and out.
Yep. Okay.
And
Yeah,
again,
I'm just rolling through my head now. I've got one law office that I'm involved in and one set of statutes. And I'm just now realizing that you're dealing with every single committee room has a set of statutes and, well, you get the idea.
right.
All right. Any questions for Michael, committee? I don't see anybody chomping at the bit. So thank you, Michael, for coming along. We're going to turn to Mike Ferrant, who was just popped up on my screen right next to you. Hi, Michael. Welcome.
Good afternoon, committee. Mike Ferrant, Director of Legislative Operations. Heard my name mentioned, and I heard Mike's comments about the loading dock there. His revised volumes of green books and supplements are a big shipment. The loading dock, which is just outside my desk in the State House, sees a lot of deliveries, a lot of action every day of the session and off session. People, constituents, and lobbying groups will send mass mailings to every legislator. There are water deliveries to restock the 30 water bottles in the building and countless other shipments to that loading dock. So I support that statement that whatever the new State House looks like, whatever the State House looks like in any kind of future has to feature that loading dock, or else it'll be quite the mess. My testimony is going to be mostly operational. I think Jen Carby had a great point about two-dimensional blueprints and how they might transform to a three-dimensional operational atmosphere. During the winter months in the session, I parked down behind the tax department building by 133. I've made that walk up that icy hill a couple times. It's not fun, and I don't imagine that the 20 Ledge Council and 6 drafting operations staff members want to be coming up and down that throughout the day, all day. So I appreciate their comments. For the Freeman, French, and Freeman report, it had myself, Peggy Delaney, Mariah Burke, and Charlene Dendo, the operations team, moving upstairs to the mezzanine. And I think that further removes us from legislators. My desk tends to be a real high traffic volume area. Legislators pop in constantly. People ask me what I do for work, and I tend to equate it to the information booth at the airport, where it's just a desk that's very accessible. You can walk up to and ask any question, and it's a good starting point for if you don't know where to go next. You want to do a project, you want to do a process, but you don't really know where to start. My desk tends to be that starting point. And I think you'd lose that if I was up a flight of stairs behind a badged door in the mezzanine.
Michael, can I freeze you right there?
Absolutely.
Yesterday just popped up as a thought, and I don't expect you to be committed in any way, shape, or form, but currently Bobby Starr has a room that is far too small for him. And your office popped up as a potential place for that to be where his committee room currently is now. Do you have any immediate reaction to that thought? And I'm not committing you to anything. I'm just curious as to what you would react to that suggestion.
I think it would make our efficiency really difficult because I don't. So Mariah, Charlene, Peggy, and I, we're in an open office bullpen type setting, and it works really well. It adds to our efficiency. We can redirect people to each other. We can bounce ideas. We can troubleshoot issues together very well. And I don't think that the 4 of us would fit safely inside Senate institutions. That room, I think, is 26.
You said Peggy, Charlene, yourself, and who was the 4th person?
Mariah Burke.
Good.
Our administrative assistant used to be Deb Curtis, and sits right behind me. But the 4 of us constantly operationally put our minds together and accomplish quite a bit on the back end for the legislature. So I think keeping the 4 of us together, centrally located, is really critical to the operational success of the legislature.
Would you agree with me that your collaboration together works easily in an open environment as opposed to each of you having closed spaces?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
I do.
Anything else you'd like to tell us?
I think so this being the tip of the iceberg, the big chunk underneath the water that's going to have to be talked about pretty soon, I think, is the public piece. And I know it's a sensitive subject. I know that the Constitution, which I respect and admire, states that the doors of the State House shall remain open to the public at all times. I think that's an important aspect of it. And I certainly can't imagine the legislature functioning without that aspect. That said, we've kept the doors open, and the doors have been more open to more members of the public through this format, through Zoom to YouTube. People can watch, they can stop, they can pause, they can rewind, they can digest the legislative process a lot more efficiently in this environment than they could in a physical environment. But I really, we talked about this issue in November. It was November 10th of last year, with the House Rules Committee took testimony on a hybrid model, an in-person legislation model. And I said then what I'll say now. I think the conversation about the public, actually the conversation about anyone being in person other than legislators and staff. So if you start to talk about anybody outside of that bubble of people, it grows in complexity and controversy very quickly. For example, if you say the press will be allowed, but no one else. Well, what members of the press, what type of press? Is it only established media outlets, or is it independent journalists? That slope goes sliding very fast. If you say, well, lobbying firms, because they represent public, they come to represent businesses, and so they should have in-person access. Are those lobbyists only registered with the Secretary of State, or are they independent lobbyists? Are they advocates? Are they groups? And that slope starts to slide really fast too. And then if you say the public, are you talking about the vaccinated public? Do you cap it at a safe number of people? The first 50 at the door come in, the next don't. Are there equity issues there? Are there ADA issues there? And again, that slope starts to slide really fast too. I don't think it's an easy thing to say staff and legislators only in person to begin with. I don't think that's an easy thing to say, but I do think it solves a lot of those other really slippery slope issues. And I do think, and I really firmly believe this, Vermonters, people in Vermont have better access to their legislative process and their legislators in this environment through YouTube than they did in person. And so I think while it's the under the water part of the iceberg, it's the biggest part of the iceberg, and it's the most important part because it will determine the decisions going forward. That was what I really wanted to say here today. I think that's a topic that should be addressed.
Okay. Committee, any questions? Michael, just a couple of things. The Constitution enables the public to have access so long as they are well behaved, which doesn't explain how us legislators got in the building, but I will say that there have been conversations going around along the lines of what you have been talking about, but there is also strong pushback to that. And this committee is going to find out some more about that as the week goes on. There is a very strong desire, for instance, on the part of the press to have access to the building. And there will be some chat about that tomorrow. I know that there have been at least one rumor, probably caused by me, that was an idea and a talking point that a simple sign on the outside of a committee room could have a number on it for capacity purposes. And that if anybody tried to get in excess of that capacity, they would be redirected to some other locality where they would have virtual access. That was a thought. That's still part of the mix of conversation, but nobody has committed to that. So I want to make that clear, that this being the tip of the iceberg, we have that concept in mind, but nobody has committed to it at this point. But I thank you for coming by and giving us a chat.
I appreciate that. And I did see that testimony. I try to picture what that looks like in my head. It's hard. It's hard to picture a safe situation like that in my head. But I wish you the best. And anytime you would like us to come back, we're more than willing and happy to.
As I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm sure there will be many more of these conversations. But thank you. Peggy, you popped up right next to Michael on my screen, so perhaps I'll invite you to testify. And we've been in committee with each other many, many times. I'm not sure if you know the basic protocol. You've got to tell us who you are and what you do before you start.
I do. Thank you, Senator Benning. For the record, Peggy Delaney, Community Services Supervisor for legislator. I want to be brief. I want to say a couple things. I agree wholeheartedly, both with what Nadine said, what Jen said, and what Mike Ferrant said. When I did talk to my staff and I invited them to testify, but told them I was going to be coming here and testify, I asked them what what they would like me to talk about. And overwhelmingly, their concern is their safety. For many of them, the thought of coming to the State House with not just the legislators and staff, but the thought of bringing the public in makes a lot of them very, very uncomfortable for a whole host of reasons. They're worried about the variants. They're worried about what's going to happen with the COVID in the next 6 months. They're worried about what Mike was saying, if you were to allow the public in, for example, and to use your example, Senator Benning, 5 people allowed, somebody else walks in, A, who's going to be the person that's going to tell them they need to leave? B, they don't want to be that person. I think that would be a really tough situation for committee assistants to be in. But if someone else doesn't do it and that person walks in, they're going to feel uncomfortable. So just a whole host of safety concerns. I feel strongly, and separate from the constitutional issues, I don't know how you would deal with that, but I feel very strongly that for next session, if at all possible, that you should focus on just having staff and legislators come to the building and making it safe for everyone. I think the most important is the legislators are able to sit back in the committee room and talk to each other face to face for legislation. That's the number one priority, obviously. And number two would be to have the staff there. I think it's obviously very important that if the committee is meeting, the committee assistant needs to be there. So first and foremost, safety is what they are concerned about. If we were to have committee rooms in different buildings, obviously that would bring challenges, not just to you guys doing legislation, but also to staff. Supervising people in different buildings will have some challenges, and certainly IT, it would cause challenges for them too, to be supporting people in different rooms. What you have to remember is committee assistants they're committee assistant for each committee they're assigned to, but they're also part of a committee services team. And we do a lot of support and work with each other as a team that would be more difficult, obviously, if we're in different buildings. So those are my biggest concerns. You talk about this being the tip of the iceberg, Senator Benning, and I understand that. I am concerned about whatever you guys decide, having enough time to come up with a plan so that I can train my staff and my staff can decide whether or not they're comfortable or not coming back. So I would know how many people to hire. That was a challenge last year. We really didn't know what was going to happen until the very end. And there were technical training that we're going to have to do. So obviously the more time we have, the better for us, but I understand the challenges that you're dealing with. So that's pretty much it for me, really.
Okay. Denise,
Oh,
just
and-
for the record, do you know how many people are considered staff that you are supervising?
20.
20?
Yep. And also what Mike was saying about us being centralized, I think that's also very important, especially Mike being there.
Are you okay as he is with an open concept for the 4 of you as opposed to
Yep.
each having separate?
Definitely much more important that it's open. Yep.
Thank you for Liz.
Oh, you're welcome.
There's our second attempt at brownie points this afternoon.
Yes. We'll take it. Thank-
I'm curious if there is some kind of limitation on the committee rooms to keep it at the committee members and staff. By staff, I'm thinking committee assistant, the ledge council person reporting on a bill.
Yep.
What do you think about the public hallways and the larger spaces in the building? Is there any concern on behalf of staff about those places?
Yes. I think my staff is just concerned about having the public at all next session. I mean, I just feel like if you can, this session coming up, just focus on staff and legislators, it will give you more time, and we'll also know more about the disease, and we'll know more about cases. We'll know more about the variants. It'll buy us more time. And I do agree with Mike. In some ways, it's been a good thing. We've been able to have, for witnesses, it's a lot more convenient. I think for the public, they are getting to see their committees in working in real time, for better or worse. So I think the public has had a lot more access. And in some ways, that has been a good thing. Obviously, we'd have to continue the live streaming in the committee rooms. I think that's something the public has gotten used to, and I think it would be almost impossible to take that away now.
I'm going to say, for the purpose of anybody out there listening, I know Denise has said that she has the opinion that the public has had better access. I'm going to stay open to the fact that the public may have a disagreement with that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
Prior to COVID,
Yep.
the safety concerns, do they rise to the same level, or are we talking about an immediate concern only that we get through the disease properly and understand what its lasting consequences are?
A good question. I would say 90% of it is related to the disease, COVID.
Okay.
I mean, obviously they have concerns about the air quality and us all being in these, crowded rooms, certainly long-term, but heightened concern because of the disease, for sure.
There are a couple of components to that you all probably should be aware of. The air quality was an issue before COVID, and trying to deal with the air quality requires building systems that can handle it. But when you go to change those systems, recognizing what we have right now is inadequate. But if you go to change those systems, you have to anticipate what are the long-term building requirements that we're going to be looking at, and how do those systems be designed in a way that they interconnect with the long-term obligations of expanded space. So it's a very complicated question. We are very cognizant that the air quality is in drastic need of attention, but I have to send out the warning flag that it is a much bigger problem than just flipping a switch or changing a filter.
Yeah.
Okay, committee, any questions for Peggy? If not, I'd like to move on. I see Michael Grady right next to you, so I don't know whether Michael would like to have a chat. Thank you for coming, Peggy. Michael, welcome to Senate Institutions, Michael.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I was unable to hear Jen and others testify, so forgive me if I repeat anything that they said. I will just kind of address a few general themes from my review of the Freeman French study. I think the first is that there needs to be greater clarity about what these options are, especially with regard to the Legislative Council attorneys and the Legislative Council drafting operations. I am not sure from their proposal whether or not Ledge Council stays in the building. And if they don't stay in the building, where do they go? And if they are sent off-site, what is that situation, that space going to look like? Will it be cubicles? Will it be offices? Will it be a bullpen?
Michael, let me stop you right off the bat because I think this is important. If there's any one consensus stakeholder-wide right now, it is that legislative council attorneys need to have their own offices to enable them to meet with clients. That's number one. Number two is to try to keep you, if not in the building, as close to the building as possible. So there are conversations going on, but as I told the folks earlier, nothing has been cast in stone, except that we understand you need to have separate office spaces. I hope that at least gives you a little bit of peace of mind as you continue in your conversation.
Well, it's a welcome statement, Senator Benning, but that's just not reflected in the report, in my opinion. And I felt that it needed to be noted.
I think it's also safe to say, and you should know, that the architects were looking at this question from a space needs perspective and not necessarily from an operational dovetailing, if you will, of the various components within inside the building. And I think even they acknowledge that. So we do have in mind that the operations may have significant alterations to whatever suggested building modifications are out there.
I understand that too. My sister's an architect, and sometimes I think she loves this hunk of stone by her house more than she loves me, you know, and it's they have a way of looking and thinking, and I appreciate that.
Well, heads up, they think the same thing about attorneys like us.
So probably. My second theme is that any of these proposals, options, they're going to affect workflow. They're going to affect quality of work. They're going to affect morale. And I don't know how. If you're going to have the remote committee spaces, some on the 5th floor, 133, some in the pavilion, etc., you're going to not have the same responsiveness of attorneys from going from one committee to another committee. There's going to need to be better planning about where an attorney's going to be. An attorney's going to have to do a lot of pre-planning to get their material ready in order to go from the pavilion to the State House to the 5th floor. So there's just operational logistics that's not recognized at all in this report because staff will have to accommodate. And I just wanted to note that's going to affect the services that you receive, because it will, by the definition of what we will have to do, affect how we provide them.
Fair enough.
And then another aspect is something that Peggy mentioned in part, and that's safety. But I'm not as concerned about safety in the short term, because I think many people are thinking about safety in the short term and the COVID precautions and way to reduce risk of spread and or variants. I'm more concerned about the safety of the building in the long run. For whatever reason, I have been involved in some of the greater safety issues at the State House when they have arisen, whether it's mold, whether it's noise, whether it's toxic fumes, whether it's the HVAC system not operating properly. I have been asked to be involved in that. And at some point, you realize that a building has so many problems that it's needs a full reassessment of what is going on. And maybe it is just the HVAC system. Maybe the HVAC system is antiquated and outdated and in need of modernization. But the thing that scared me, Senator Benning, about what you just said is like, oh, we need to plan to put an HVAC system on the building now for our future growth. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of digging a little bit of a grave with an HVAC system, because they're supposed to be designed for the exact spaces. And if you're trying to estimate what the space is going to be, you're kind of probably dooming yourself to a system that's not going to be fully optimal. And those are my major themes. And I would like, my last request is to keep us involved. At some point, you all will need to make the decisions, and we'll have to stand by. But up until that point, I would request that we be involved as much as possible, because like you, we will be dealing with it also, and it would be appreciated if we could be involved in that planning.
Fair enough. Committee, questions? Michael, thank you very much for coming by.
Welcome.
As I said earlier, this is the tip of the iceberg in conversation, and we are simply letting people express themselves in any way, shape, or form they want to, so we can get a handle on what the next steps are going to be. Catherine, you've popped up on my video screen. Poor Tony's been out there frozen in the background. But you're popped up and your microphone is on, so welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Benham with the Joint Fiscal Office, but I'm more than happy to let Tony go if I see you all the time, so I was wanting to let other people go first. I don't know if Tony was testifying.
I don't know either, so we can ask him. We'll see.
Okay, he may have been here for the issues that were going on earlier.
But he also is going to testify.
I'm sorry, who was?
He apparently was. Tony, are you listening?
I am, Senator.
Oh, there.
I'm happy.
Catherine says she's ceding the floor to you, so welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my name is Tony Morse. I'm with the Office of Legislative Information Technology. I currently occupy the position of copy room technician. I basically make copies and prints for everything and everyone in the State House and in the Legislative Department. I would like to preface my comments with the fact that I am speaking of my own opinion. I am not representing my department here today.
Tony, can I just ask you before you go any further, how many documents would you say you average in a day?
In a day, individual documents, or are we talking total number of copies?
Yeah, let's go both if you know what the answer is.
In previous sessions before the COVID crisis, I would say I was averaging between 300 and 500 a day for a total number of copies between 8 and 20,000.
Per day?
Per day.
Okay.
During session, we routinely go through approximately 8 cases of paper here a week. That's 40,000 sheets.
All right. And you obviously also handle resolving legislator questions in the legislative lounge when they run into a problem with the copy machine.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Any other functions, just giving basic biographical information about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, as a member of the information technology team, I do support legislators and staff when they have problems with anything related to technology, be it their phone, their iPhones, their desk phones, their iPads, tablets, computers, copiers, printers, whatever I can help with, I do so.
Okay. And are you still in the State House right now?
Yes, sir, I am. I have been coming to the State House every day since approximately mid-January.
Okay. Please continue.
Thank you, Senator. One thing that comes up a lot when we're talking about the current situation is technology and the use of services like YouTube and Zoom. But one thing that I would say is that based upon the number of copies and prints and mailings that I still do, despite all of this technology, paper is not going away. and the functions of the copy room, I think, are still very important. So I was pleased to see that in the report, additional space was allotted for the copy room. I think this is an important change for a number of reasons. The first being the present space is very confining. We have 3 large multifunction copying machines here. When you account for the amount of space for the machines and then for the stock, there is about the space of 3 people. That's 3 people standing next to each other, not social distancing. It makes it difficult to work on large projects. It makes it difficult to communicate with multiple people at once. During session, it is not uncommon to have a line of people outside the door waiting for services. The confined space also presents a degree of health hazard because these machines produce ozone. And at present, the only HVAC we have in here is a small household air conditioning unit. And it is, quite frankly, not sufficient. And when all of the machines are running, the temperature in this room gets to be very uncomfortable.
Okay.
And in terms of the information technology portion of our jobs, of my job, I should say, I agree with the assessment that more technology will be needed. That's also reflected in the space allocation for information technology going forward. I do believe that is well-needed space. It will accommodate not only the additional staff members that are accounted for in the report, but it will also account for the large amount of equipment that will be necessary, and it will allow us to better store the equipment we currently have. We have a lot of machines, servers, equipment of that nature in the basement at present. It's rooms with literal granite walls. Ideally, that would be in a climate-controlled environment. And Senator, you mentioned earlier that there was one thing that there was consensus upon. It was that the attorneys and the legislature should remain in the same building. I would venture to say there is a second point, and that is that there are not enough restrooms in this building.
You're the first one that's brought that up, but as I think about it, you're probably right.
I strongly suspect I'm not the first one to think it.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell us?
I think that's all I have for now. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the committee.
Thanks for coming. Committee, any questions? I don't see anybody chomping at the bit to ask you something, Tony, so thanks for coming by.
Thank you, sir.
Catherine, we are back to you.
Sure. I think everybody else is going. I don't see anybody else. Is that correct?
Well, I see Matt Romei is here. I don't know whether he was planning to testify or not. And I was actually going to give the last say to my own committee assistant because I don't want to come out of this with a problem going into tomorrow. So anyway,
Sure.
But please go right ahead.
Sure. I'm Catherine Benham with the Joint Fiscal Office. I'm going to be short on this, but I wanted to say change is hard. I think what I would say to you is space was a problem pre-COVID. It's going to continue to be a problem. We are a set of staff that have already been approved. Our office has a person, IT has a person, Ledge Council has, I think, 2 people. And so we're just, we also have those pressures separate from the COVID piece as well. So I think it's something to keep in mind as you move forward, that thinking about what staff needs are going to be and what numbers will be when you start thinking the long-term plan also 5 to 10 years down the road is a piece of this as well. I would say for the Joint Fiscal Office, which I'm a part of, we are for those of you who don't know, we're in the Pink Lady 1 Baldwin Street, which is right across the parking lot. We're on the 1st and part of the 2nd floor, and then Ledge Council has part of the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor. And I would say that we have, the majority of us share offices, but we do have a meeting room, and it is important to have places where you can meet in private, have some private discussions on that. So that is the one thing that I'm gonna keep an eye on. And I just do worry, we have a new person potentially coming on this summer, and we have to figure out how to manage our space as it is. So good luck with this, and I'm happy. I don't know if you have any questions, but I just wanted to remind everybody that's where we were.
How many people are actually in JFO?
There are 15, I believe, and we will be 16 next year.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? If not, thank you for coming by. Matt Romei, I think you are next on my list. First, you need to unmute.
Get all the things unmuted here. Good afternoon, Matthew Romei, Capitol Police Chief. Appreciate the committee inviting everyone in this afternoon. I just, even though my beloved Alabama Crimson Tide's not playing football this time of year, I did just want to bring to your attention a couple of the elephants in the room, and maybe an encouragement for this committee or some committee of the legislature to try to at least start eating them a bite at the time. The State House was very full pre-COVID. Senator Benning, I appreciate your encouragement to lessen a little bit of the emphasis on COVID as we start talking about these things. But, you know, I'll tell you, the State House was 7 doors, and the limited capacity and the small rooms, it was a challenge prior to the pandemic. And I think as we start coming out of it, you're going to see a similar challenge, if not more so of one. One of the things that also comes to mind is the idea of maintenance versus repair. If I fail to maintain my truck, eventually I'm going to have a pretty big repair bill. And in a lot of ways, it seems like that's what has happened with space issues around government, around the legislature in particular. When you don't deal with something for a longer period of time, the fix or the point to get back to where you are in a good place seems shocking. $42 million shocking, according to the Freeman, French and Freeman report. But that comes from not having changed very much of anything for how long? I've only been here 4 years, but my understanding is that life hasn't changed a whole lot around here in quite a long period of time. You know, President Reagan said the 9 scariest words in the English language were "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." For me, the words that scare me more is that's the way we've always done it. And sometimes we get real locked into things because they are comfortable. They are the way we've always done it. And maybe or maybe not, it may or may not be the best way to do things kind of as we go forward. You know, even pre-pandemic, if you think back to some of the legislative sessions, very similar thing happens to what happens in basic training in the Army. About 4 weeks into basic training, a thing goes around the barracks that is affectionately referred to as barracks cough. Everybody gets it, everybody gets over it, and then that training cycle moves on with what they're doing. We almost see that every year in the legislature too. When you think about it, at the end of January, 1st of February, all these people that have come in from all over the state of Vermont are now sick because they're exposing each other to things that they haven't seen before or they haven't seen in a while. Everybody gets a little sick. A lot of folks get over it fine, and you guys go about your session. That is a telltale sign for someone in even a related medical field that, you know, the building's handling something it may not be capable of handling. Another thing that comes to mind when we're looking at this and Senator Benning, I very much appreciated hearing you say the words analysis paralysis yesterday. I think Michael Chernick could probably tell you how many space studies and State House reports there are collecting dust around here somewhere. I know that we have 4 security studies that have been done back over the past 25 years. And these studies happen, we look at them, and it seems like we study them to death until they're almost no longer relevant for what we're doing. And I would encourage you to try to avoid that as you continue to go forward down this pathway. I understand that there's a media discussion tomorrow, and that will be of great interest for us, as it's certainly not anything we have a problem with, but it's certainly something that we are interested in, because whatever you decide to do for access, or for who gets in the building or who doesn't get in the building, who gets in the media box, who doesn't get in the media box, it ends up being us that has to enforce that decision. So we will be watching with great anticipation as you have that discussion tomorrow. Just on a side note, there's 57 capitals in the U.S. So when you start looking at other capitals and start figuring out maybe if you want to copy something else they did, just know that while there's 57 capitals, there's about 75 different ways of doing things. So you can look at another capital, you can look at another process, but pick what you want and put that in the mix to go forward. I don't know that you're ever going to find anything that will exactly replicate what we have going on here. Just looking at my chicken scratch going down the road. On a side note, when we were bored one day, we actually put all your committees in rooms. And considering the rooms that we have temporarily upfitted in other buildings and within the State House, we only reused 2 of the Senate committee rooms. That was Finance and Appropriations, 5 and 6. I'm not saying that's the solution you would go to, but we made it work. And when you're looking at this and you're almost overwhelmed with the idea of what are you going to do between now and January, just know that there are pathways forward. It's not going to look like it did the first week of March in 2020. I don't know that there's anybody out there that can wave a wand to make that happen. But there are pathways forward, and it's just going to require everyone to be a little flexible and work together to get it in motion and to get it done. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that the safety piece, the safety and security piece, has largely shifted over towards COVID and health and welfare issues, but I will remind you that we are in somewhat of unique times in the physical security issues. At some point in time, I would love for that discussion to be had, knowing that very little of it can be had in open session. I do note in the study just one interesting little thing to put on the tickler. There was a thought of moving our State House operations office into the current space occupied by Senate Agriculture. And I knew there was something out there floating around in my head that said that was a bad idea, but I just couldn't remember what it was. I remember what it is now, but I would rather not discuss it in open committee. But it would benefit us operationally to hang on to that space that we have down there by that lower elevator. That said, I'm open for questions or concerns, or also throw me out of the committee room, and that's cool too.
Chief, 2 things I am very sure of. First, there is a path going forward. Getting it accomplished is a bit of a problem, but we're going to get there. And the other thing is that when we get there, not everybody is going to be 100% happy. So I appreciate the comments. I don't know if the committee has any questions. If not, thank you, sir, for coming by. I'm sure we will be having more conversation especially on the security question, because as you know, there's another committee set up to have that conversation in a separate environment. I don't see any other witnesses on the list, but I did want to give Denise an opportunity to tell me anything she wanted to say while we're having the conversation.
You should just do it in the open.
Geez, I don't know. Should we make her do that in the open? And Denise, you don't have to say anything at all if you don't want to. but
What did you say?
I said, do you want to say it in the open, what you want to tell them, or what? Don't answer that.
No, I won't. There's too much hesitancy there, so. No, I'm fine. I probably concur with a lot of people. The crowding is a problem. I think we are more available to all the people that are testifying and all the people that want to hear what's going on. So I think Zoom's been a wonderful thing. To make us, out there. And there shouldn't be any confusion with Zoom. And it's much easier for people to get the witness testimony and all that through the YouTube than asking for duplicates through Tony's shop. Those are the positive things from this horrible COVID thing that have happened to us. And I know all of us miss the State House. It's just a wonderful building. And like Senator Mazza says, he needs to get his deals done in person. And that is another.
Catherine and I can't pass notes.
I know. Well, Catherine and I pass notes too.
All right.
So it's mainly about vacations though. So anyway, yeah, pros and cons, and I don't know how you're going to do it going forward. As you can see, Senator Benning, the note from Vermont Digger was like, we're ready for a fight and you're not going to let us come in the State House. That's how I took it.
Well, there'll be a lot of changes in the whole world from this. This is not going to go away nationwide. There's going to be different changes in everything. Look what's happening already. Shopping, everything is changing, and it's not going to go back the other way. It's going to be
no, it isn't.
It's going to stay the way it is.
Masks are going to stay on, and Zoom is going to stay with us.
Churches will be different. Everything is going to be different.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate you commenting. I didn't want to leave this conversation without giving you the opportunity to say something.
Lawyers won't have anything to do now because it's working well without them.
Yeah, but we still got to have those architects and planning people coming in. So
that's true.
Somebody's going to get paid here one way or the other.
That's true.
Wait till you see the tab on this one. Wait till you see the tab on this one, Joe, for architect designs and when it's.
Oh, I know. Anybody else want to say anything at all?
Looks like Catherine does. She had her hand up.
I didn't see a hand. Catherine, are you still out there?
Oh, okay. No.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
She was just waving to us.
Oh.
All right. With that, committee, as you may have heard, tomorrow we've got the press coming. You can think of it as a press conference in reverse where we get to ask all the questions and they get to do the answering. Should be fun.
That's true.
So we will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. And that will conclude our committee conversation for the afternoon. Denise, you can